Today, breaking news: the conflict in Eastern Europe has taken a dramatic turn as Ukraine now faces growing pressure from both the East and the North, raising urgent questions about whether the country is slowly being surrounded by coordinated military moves from Russia and Belarus. What once appeared to be a two-sided war is beginning to feel like a wider strategic squeeze, with consequences that could reshape the balance of power in the region. For months, attention remained fixed on Russia's direct military operations inside Ukrainian territory. However, recent signals, joint statements, and synchronized military activities now suggest that Belarus may no longer be playing a passive supporting role. Instead, it appears increasingly aligned with Moscow's objectives, creating a new layer of threat for Kyiv. Belarus shares a long and sensitive border with northern Ukraine, including areas dangerously close to the capital, Kyiv. Even without launching a full-scale invasion, the mere presence of Belarusian forces conducting joint drills with Russia forces Ukraine to spread its defenses thinner. This strategic pressure alone changes the battlefield equation. Russia has repeatedly framed its actions as defensive and necessary for national security. Belarus, under President Alexander Lukashenko, has echoed similar rhetoric, claiming that joint actions are meant to deter NATO and protect regional stability. Yet from Ukraine's perspective, these explanations offer little comfort. Joint military exercises between Russia and Belarus have intensified in both frequency and scale. These drills involve armored units, missile systems, air defense operations, and coordinated command structures. While officially labeled as training, such exercises closely resemble real combat preparation. Ukraine's military leadership cannot afford to ignore these developments. Even if Belarus does not immediately enter the war, Ukraine must assume the possibility. This forces Kyiv to divert troops, air defenses, and surveillance resources away from the eastern and southern fronts. The idea of Ukraine being surrounded is not only military but psychological. Warfare is as much about pressure and uncertainty as it is about firepower. By signaling potential joint action, Russia and Belarus amplify fear, stress, and strategic confusion within Ukraine. Western intelligence agencies have closely monitored troop movements near Belarusian borders. Satellite imagery and intercepted communications indicate growing interoperability between Russian and Belarusian forces. This suggests that if a joint operation were ordered, coordination would be swift. Belarus's role in the early days of the war already set a precedent. Russian forces used Belarusian territory as a staging ground during initial offensives. Although Belarusian troops did not officially cross the border in large numbers, the logistical support was undeniable. Now the question is whether that support could evolve into direct participation. Lukashenko has walked a careful line, offering loyalty to Moscow while trying to avoid domestic backlash and international sanctions. But with each new joint action, that line becomes thinner. For Ukraine, the northern threat is uniquely dangerous. Kyiv lies within striking distance of Belarusian territory. Even the threat of missile launches or limited incursions forces Ukraine to maintain constant readiness around its capital. Russia's strategic logic appears clear. By opening or threatening multiple fronts, it aims to exhaust Ukraine's resources. A stretched defense increases the chance of breakthroughs elsewhere, even without major advances from the north. Belarus, meanwhile, gains protection and leverage through alignment with Russia. Its leadership relies heavily on Moscow for political survival and economic support. In return, Russia gains strategic depth and a reliable partner on NATO's eastern flank, the international response has been cautious but alert. NATO has increased monitoring along its eastern borders, particularly in Poland and the Baltic states. Any escalation involving Belarus raises the risk of miscalculation beyond Ukraine. Diplomatic channels remain active but strained. Western governments warn Belarus against deeper involvement, promising severe consequences if its troops cross into Ukraine. So far, these warnings have not stopped joint military signaling. Inside Ukraine, public sentiment is tense but resilient. Years of conflict have hardened national resolve, yet the idea of facing a coordinated Russia-Belarus front is deeply concerning. Civil defense preparations have quietly increased in northern regions. The economic impact of expanded conflict would be severe. Supply routes, infrastructure, and trade corridors could come under threat. Even rumors of escalation can disrupt markets and humanitarian operations. Russia's messaging emphasizes unity and strength. State media highlights joint exercises as proof that Moscow is not isolated. Belarusian media mirrors this narrative, portraying cooperation as defensive and lawful. Ukraine counters with its own messaging, stressing sovereignty and the right to self-defense. Officials warn that any attack from Belarusian soil would be met with firm resistance. This rhetorical exchange adds another layer to the conflict. Military analysts note that Belarus's army is smaller and less experienced than Ukraine's. However, when combined with Russian forces, its value lies in geography rather than sheer numbers. A northern offensive does not have to be massive to be effective. Even limited incursions, missile strikes, or sabotage operations could disrupt Ukrainian defenses and logistics. Weather and terrain also play roles. Northern Ukraine's forests, rivers, and infrastructure create both challenges and opportunities for any advancing force. Ukraine has spent time fortifying key routes, anticipating this risk. Russia's broader objective appears unchanged. It seeks to weaken Ukraine's ability to resist, reduce Western support, and force political concessions. Adding Belarus to the equation serves this long-term strategy. For Belarus, the risks are significant. Direct involvement could trigger harsher sanctions and internal unrest. Lukashenko must weigh loyalty to Moscow against the stability of his own regime. So far, Belarusian leadership insists it has no plans to invade Ukraine, yet military history shows that intentions can shift rapidly under pressure or changing calculations. The uncertainty itself is a weapon. Ukraine must prepare for the worst while hoping for restraint. This constant state of alert drains manpower, morale, and resources over time. Western military aid to Ukraine continues, but logistics grow more complex as threats multiply. Air defense systems, intelligence sharing, and training are more critical than ever. If Belarus were to enter the war openly, it would mark a major escalation. The conflict would no longer be viewed as a bilateral war, but a regional confrontation with wider implications. Russia may also be testing reactions. By signaling joint action without fully committing, it observes how Ukraine and the West respond. These reactions help shape future moves. The humanitarian dimension cannot be ignored. Any expansion of fighting risks new waves of displacement, civilian casualties, and infrastructure damage, especially in areas previously less affected. Ukraine's leadership faces difficult choices. Protecting the north is essential, but abandoning pressure points elsewhere could be disastrous. Balancing these priorities defines the current phase of the war. Belarus's population remains divided. Many citizens oppose involvement, while state-controlled narratives push alignment with Russia. This internal tension adds unpredictability to future decisions. History shows that alliances formed under pressure often deepen during crises. Russia and Belarus have long discussed closer military integration, and the war accelerates this process. For now, the situation remains fluid. No large-scale northern offensive has begun, but the signs are impossible to ignore. Troops, equipment, and rhetoric all point toward increased coordination. Ukraine is not standing still. Defensive preparations, intelligence operations, and diplomatic outreach continue around the clock. Survival depends on anticipation as much as reaction. The coming weeks may prove decisive. Either the joint signaling remains a pressure tactic, or it transforms into concrete action. Both scenarios carry serious risks. Global attention remains focused on Ukraine, but fatigue is real. Any new escalation could either renew urgency or deepen divisions among international partners. In the end, the question is not only whether Ukraine is surrounded, but how it adapts to a battlefield shaped by alliances and signals rather than clear declarations of war. The Russia-Belarus partnership sends a clear message of unity, but it also exposes vulnerabilities and risks for both sides. Every move tightens the web of consequences. Ukraine's future now hinges on resilience, support, and strategic clarity. As joint action signals grow louder, the world watches closely, aware that a single decision could redefine the war's next chapter.